story next. Police are on the hunt for at least 8 suspects in connection with the Zanzou nightclub abuse incident. Officials have released a statement in which they outline the latest investigation in their information in their investigation. But we also want to look at the Department of Justice and how it's reacted to this. And the Deputy Director General in the Department, Advocate Shireen Said, joins us now to talk more about it. Shireen, Advocate Said, good morning and thanks for your time. How is what is depicted at the club, the violence, the torture, the dehumanization, an affront to the foundational rights guaranteed in South Africa's democracy?
Good morning. Good morning to you and your viewers and listeners. Thanks for having us on the show, despite the really horrific circumstances of this incident at this club. I want to premise this in terms of how we view this, and I think how we as a country view this, given our constitutional democracy. The first one is historically, and this is why this situation and the importance of human dignity is just so significant given our history. You will know that we've had a system that was both institutionalized and arbitrary types of torture meted to all of us during apartheid in many and various forms. So if you look at our constitution, you will see that the first principle, the first words are that everyone had, that the Constitution was founded on the principles of human dignity. That's how significant it is for us as a country because of what we had suffered. And so building this culture of rights is really very important to us. Now, if you go further into the Constitution in Section 10, it says, again, everyone has the right to, has inherent dignity and the right to have their dignity respected and protected. And if you recall, Iman, so many years ago, the first case that came through the Constitutional Court was that of State versus Makwanyane, which was on the capital punishment, the death penalty, simply because of of the significance, again, of the right to dignity and to respect our worth as a human being, because, again, of our circumstances. So that tells you just how centered and how fundamental, and it's such a cornerstone to our democracy that human dignity is respected and protected. And then further, just speaking on the issues of human dignity, we have ratified the Convention against all forms, Convention against torture, cruel, inhuman, degrading treatment and punishment. This is an instrument that the principles of dignity have been, in our constitution, have been founded upon. In fact, South Africa, this was one of the first instruments that we ratified after the Convention on the Rights of the, ratified after the Convention on the Rights of the Child, again, because of its significance and that we should never have the kinds of torture and cruel and degrading treatment and punishment in our country again. And if I go to the definition of torture in terms of this convention, it says torture means any act by which severe pain or suffering, whether physical or mental, is intentionally inflicted on a person for such purposes as obtaining from him or a third person information or a confession, punishing him for an act or a third person is committed or is suspected to have committed, intimidating, coercing, and it goes on to speak about discrimination and the pain and suffering. So,
Advocate Said, let me come in there because I think you've done a really good job at explaining again why what we witnessed, for those who had the stomach to watch what was out there, was an affront to our constitutional rights, our constitutional guarantees, especially in the context of a dark apartheid past. And we know that rights on paper only become real when they live in people's lived experiences. I'm not sure how much of that content you were able to watch, and certainly for those who, who find it hard to see people's rights being taken away, especially as in the way that you've explained them, it really is something that's difficult to watch. But when you look at those videos and you look at the extent of the impunity that's depicted there, the power and the extreme nature nature of the abuse that was depicted, it seems to be truly the product of a sick and corrupt mind, but it also seems to be practiced and familiar in the way that they had behaved. And there are allegations that this type of behavior had been going on historically at this particular establishment. What do you make of the extremities that were depicted in that video?
Yes, indeed, it was a really hard one to watch, and someone who works on issues of human rights, unfortunately, one has to engage and see this kinds of practices. So yes, I think in our country, and this is why I was giving you the legal framework, in our country we've seen this, and I think there are many aspects to this. The first one is we've almost normalized this kind of behavior, just from what was happening, the fact that people feel like they can get away with this, there's no accountability. And I'm sure not just in this nightclub, but I think this kind of behavior happens everywhere else, well, in many circumstances. And there's two parts to it. The one is the kind of impunity that people behave with. The other one is also how we, and I mean, one doesn't know the circumstances, this matter is still under investigation, is how we still have grapple with what we should tolerate, how we respond. And thankfully somebody has come forward to pass this over, but it also means that this kind of behavior has been allowed to happen and not many are coming forward. So it speaks to our society and how intolerant we are in certain respects, but also psychologically how traumatized we are. At the same time, we also have seen, and this is not just confined to torture, but just also in terms of race and discrimination, where we find people are not as empowered to challenge, and sometimes, and in this circumstance, because they were in a confined area, they were quite disempowered, but also from other aspects to feeling empowered to be able to take this up and to not feel as like the system isn't behind you. So the interesting thing now is that people are coming forward, which we're hearing from our colleagues in SAPS, and there's a lot of attention to it from the investigation purposes, and this is where we as the Department of Justice and part of the Justice Cluster will do our best to monitor and ensure that there is accountability, because we at the same time also can't take a law into our hands, but also we've got to really root out this kind of challenges that people are experiencing, because the thing is, this has come out. So in other instances, we don't always see this, and it doesn't always have to be in institutions. So we're seeing this kind of torture and cruel and inhuman punishment or degrading treatment happen across in many instances. So I think we've got to, unfortunately, the circumstances present themselves, but we've got to, in some ways, intensify our awareness around not tolerating and reporting this kind of behavior.
Advocate Said, I want to come in on when you said, this impunity is allowed to happen, and I'd like to hear from you who or what you think has allowed this to happen. There are allegations that matters in the past of a similar nature have been reported to police. There are allegations around collusion with the local police. And so I'm hoping as well that during the course of these investigations, that can be established. But I really just want, in closing, to hear from you what or who you think has allowed this to happen.
Well, when I say allowed to happen, I think when people in the public sphere see something like this happening, it's really incumbent upon them to report this to local authorities. Now, we have a very strong system of governance where people feel police are not doing what they need to do. There are ways in which they can report these things to the various mechanisms that are in place. Furthermore, and again, we tend to, as a society in general, despite the systems that we have, not tend to be as reactive or proactive in challenging where there have been reports and they've not been dealt with, or investigations may have taken place, who's following up on them, and using the various channels. I mean, as an example, whenever any government department, as we always do, are reporting to Parliament, questions and issues that may have arisen is one angle of where we can participate in our democracy. And I think that's another cornerstone of our democracy that we in general don't seem to use, as especially from the side of the public, because at the end of the day, it's our collective responsibility as to what kind of culture, what type of governance, and how we manage the areas of law and order in our country.
Right.
While government will have the systems in place, it is important that the general public also takes a responsibility to report such issues and to bring to our attention when the system's not working, because we can't have eyes all over, but our systems are meant to support us. But that's why I think we need, and thankfully somebody has come forward in this particular matter, but we hope that others come forward on other types of matters as well.
Advocate Shireen Said, thank you for your time this morning. She's the DDG in the Justice and Constitutional Development Department.